Hey, I wanted to talk about, review, recommend a book that I recently finished, finally. Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. And I've heard of this book for years. It was written in, if I'm not mistaken, in 1976. Um, and it's considered a classic. Like I said, I've heard about it for a long time. I watched the movie back in the early 90s with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt. I remember liking that movie a lot. But I've never read the book. I love reading. I'm an avid reader, but I've never read this book. I'm almost 40 years old, and finally, I read it. And even though I knew more or less what happened because what happens in the book because I saw the movie a while back, but still, I was always curious. I love gothic horror, vampire books, so um, this one was a must on my list for a long time. Finally, I read it. So, um, yeah, I loved it. I love this book. It's actually, I have to say, it's one of my favorites. The way Anne Rice writes as an author, I've only read this book from. This is the only book I've read in her catalog. So I just have to say that I'm excited to read the next book. Okay, that I believe it's the Vampire Lestat. That's next, but yeah, the Vampire Lestat and Queen of the Damned, which I saw that movie and well, yeah, I wish I forgot about that movie, but I do want to read the book. I'm not gonna judge the book because of that experience watching that movie. But anyway, Interview with the Vampire. Um, it starts off. It's basically. Where can I don't even know how to explain it because it's amazing. Okay, it's a vampire who wants to tell his story, his life story, to a boy that's interviewing him. That's why it's called Interview with the Vampire. And he does tell his life story from when and how he was turned to a vampire and his journey through life throughout the years. Super interesting, and the way she writes, it's one of those books, honestly, that you get lost in, and I mean that obviously in a great thing, as a great experience that I highly recommend. You get lost in this book, reading this book. Um, I really didn't want it to end. You know, I was just so freaking into this book. The characters, you just um, feel for these characters, and you obviously you sympathize with the main character, what he goes through. He goes through a lot of crap. He goes through a lot of stuff, and has suffered throughout his life with this. You can say this curse as a vampire. So um, I highly recommend this book. Once again, if you love horror movies, if you love getting lost in even though you're not into horror, even if you're not into horror, I highly recommend this book because you love the characters. You love the characters. Once again, you feel for these characters. There's one thing that I knew was gonna happen because I saw. I'm not gonna spoil it, but because I had to watch the movie and it happens towards the end and it's just tragic. And as I was reading it and reaching the end, I thought, oh wow, it's coming. This part is coming, and the way she wrote that tragedy that happens, wow, it's heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking, but it's just a great book. Just check it out, read it. I can't wait for the next book. The Vampire Lestat. I'm looking forward to it. I'm gonna pick that up very soon. And honestly, with this book, I read it in a few days. I would read it before I would go to sleep throughout the day, and then when I would wake up, I would read a few pages on it. I just would think about it. Would think about this book. So great experience reading this book. Highly recommend it. I'm not gonna get too much into the plot This book has been reviewed, re-reviewed. It's been praised. It's a classic. Anne Rice, my new favorite author. I know she won't disappoint with the next book that I'm going to read, A Vampire Lestat. But yeah, check this one out, please. Great book, and that's all.